So why did Prabhupada stress the study of Srimad Bhagavatam for our children? Because it creates a child, an all-round child who's expert both materially and spiritually. Prabhupada knew that the study of Srimad Bhagavatam is so powerful that a children not only, becomes a pure devotee, but also materially he benefits greatly. Prabhupada wanted our children not only to become, preachers and be engaged in devotional service, but he also wanted them to become good citizens and good leaders in society. And he felt very convinced that the study of Srimad Bhagavatam will give training both materially and spiritually. Why? Because Srimad Bhagavatam covers all subject matters. And because the study of Srimad Bhagavatam evokes curiosity about life and it invokes critical thinking skills and good reasoning skills, a child naturally, learns the art of going very deep into a subject matter, to looking at the world in a very critical way. When a child studies Srimad Bhagavatam, he's not going to take everything blindly, what people tell him, what the world outside believes in, or whatever he learns in his educational institution. He's going to look at things from a spiritual perspective. And that's the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. It permeates in a child's life in every area of his life, whether material or spiritual. So today, like I promised, I would like to do a specific section of the Bhagavatam and take you through a practical workshop of how to teach this particular section to our children. Now, the process that I'm going to describe to you, this methodology that I mentioned in my seminar some weeks ago also, it involves, let me share that screen with you. Yeah. So this is the process that I mentioned earlier. The parents or teachers, they read the purports ahead of time, and they note down the points on the side as to what they would like to discuss with the children. Now, sometimes you note the points, but you may not, at that moment, you may think, well, let's go on. I think it's getting too long, or maybe the children we need to move on. So you may make decisions like that. That's okay. But the idea is that by reading the purports ahead of time, we actually get inspired to teach Bhagavatam to our children. It really helps in that inspiration, to our own inspiration, because we are ready for it. We understand very deeply what that story, the morals that story is giving, and we also understand very deeply the issues that we would like to bring up in relation with our life, in relation with the life, the world that the children see, and how to relate it. Especially children who are going to school, it becomes very, very valuable. Because in school, as you know, there's a different mood there and the different value system. So by understanding the deeper aspects of these points, the children are able to relate it to their life, outside the home. Then having done that, we sit together with the children. Now we can sit in a circle if there are just a few children, or we can be in a classroom situation. Of course, at this point with the COVID, it's an online situation. So we can do that. And I do a lot of online classes. I have about 100 children with batches of 10 or 12 children in each batch, according to their age. And it's amazing that even just online, just through the process of hearing, through the audio, one can really grasp and attract the child's attention. Why? Because the nature of the topic is so good, it's so powerful. It attracts, Krishna attracts the hearts of every living entity. And the children, because they can participate in this process, because it's in the form of discussion. It is very interactive because they can do the, express themselves, communicate. They find it very, very enlivening. If children were to sit down and just listen to us, naturally they will be bored. But when they are active participants to this discussion, then intelligence is sharpened and they are able to think and reason and critically analyze situations. And they feel great pride in being able to give their own opinion. And they become humble to hear other children's opinions as well. So we open it for discussion from time to time. If we've read the purpose ahead of time, we feel confident that we can bring up certain issues and we can start discussing them. Now, there's many ways to do that, and everybody may find their own creative way to do something. So there's no any particular, fixed way, but overall the principles are that we, as the children's attraction to Krishna develops, then we make the questions more on the how level rather than the what level. In other words, we don't say always that what happened now, and in other words, we don't just talk about the plot of the story, that this happened and this happened, but we rather go deeper into it, why this is happening. And we also learn to contrast, right? So there are certain points that I wrote down which help a teacher or a parent to teach, our discussion should be in such a way that we encourage our children to ask questions and to raise questions and to make comments. So frequently, as we discuss some deep point, we wait, we stop, and we open it for others to make comments. Okay, we don't rush to it, but because children like to, it helps them to actually discuss one point rather than rushing to another point. And then actually what happens is one point leads to another point, and then leads to another point, and very soon you will realize that you've discussed many, many important things. Okay? And if you don't know the answer to a particular question, don't be afraid to say that you don't know. And actually, it becomes a great opportunity at that point to go deeper, maybe read one purport somewhere which has the answer to that question. So the child knows, well, my teacher, she knows a lot more, but yet it's not like we know everything. And how Prabhupada gives the answer to every question through the Srimad Bhagavatam. So then we try to relate the story to daily life, sometimes, not all the time, like we don't want to continuously relate it to a practical life, because sometimes we have to be careful in that process, because in children, we don't want to corner the children or point fingers at them, For example, in the case of Dhruva's story, Suruchi was very, very harsh to Dhruva. She displays some very, very bad qualities. We don't point a finger at the child and say, well, remember that time when you also got upset and you lost your temper and you got angry with your brother? No, these type of discussions, they become very, very detrimental to a child, and the child backs off and thinks, well, I don't want to read the Srimad Bhagavatam, because then, I'm shown to be a bad boy. So we don't want to do that, right? We discuss the story as it is, the nature of Suruchi, the nature of Suniti, and we can compare that and bring it to light how one type of behavior is so beneficial and leads to success versus another type of behavior. But we can, but to a certain extent, sometimes we can bring it to practical life, right? For example, we can say that how, in the point where Shringi, cursed Parikshit Maharaj, right? And that anger we can discuss as being really, really how it's bad anger, right? But there is also something like good anger, right? So we can take the examples from scriptures when a devotee has displayed anger, which has been actually very good and beneficial. So in other words, anger also can be used in the service of the Lord. Right? So we make comparisons like that. Okay, in Dhruva's case, Dhruva displayed anger when he was killing Yaksha, or Suruchi having lost her sense of, equality and kindness and compassion. and displayed harsh behavior. But then we see Suniti in contrast, how she displayed behavior of great patience and reflection and integrity. So in this way, we can make comparisons for the child, and this way the child learns very clearly that, okay, well, this is bad anger, but this is good anger. Okay, and it can, and that itself he will be able to imbibe it in his own life. When he learns the difference between good anger and bad anger, he's able to take those teachings to heart through the medium of the scriptures. Okay. So, and then in the end, we have a realizations class. And that's really the most fun part, where the child, having heard for several weeks, the story, then he's ready to reflect. He's ready to talk. He's ready to give his own comments. And I tell you, it is the most exciting part of the study of Bhagavatam, is when the child can think very deeply of all the things he's learned, and is able to give his own comments on that point. So realization brings the whole thing to a conclusion where the child feels very, very satisfied. Right? Now, I suggest that there should be a realizations class after every class, a short one, but sometimes if the time doesn't allow it, because if you've given yourself 1 hour and there's so many children and so much to discuss, and you realize that there's not enough time, then, and if there's been a lot of discussion during the class, and reflection, then we can skip it. But in general, it's nice to end with a short realizations. But in the end of the story, of the entire Dhruva story, chapter rather, like if you do chapter 8, then at the end of the chapter 8, one can have a realizations class. Okay?
No. I was keeping your neck paining because of this, nothing else.
Okay, so I think somebody needs to mute there. Yeah, or maybe they can turn their video off. We can see the video. Okay, so then okay, so I think pretty much we got all these points of okay, and one other thing, and I know these questions come up later, but one other point is that don't feel bad if you haven't read Srimad Bhagavatam before you were teaching the child, because as adults we have more experience than the children, and we'll always be able to share our life's experiences to them, and we will always be teachers to them. So in fact, when we read with the children, we advance also simultaneously. And we should think of our time with them as a time like we would spend with an adult reading Srimad Bhagavatam. We should not see any difference between studying Srimad Bhagavatam with adults versus children. We can get as absorbed and relish the nectar and the nectar of these of the scripture even with children. And that has been my experience teaching so many children over the years, as well as my own children. I realize how nectarian it is, and how there is no lack of absorption or the results that we experience after learning such profound things. So we already went through all that, the different age groups and how to teach them and how to go deeper and deeper. So today I want to focus on the Dhruva story. So I want to take this one example of chapter 8 of the 4th canto and bring to light certain questions or things that we can bring up. As all of you know, I'm sure you read this chapter before this meeting. So as we know, this little boy Dhruva, who's only 5 years old, he was the son of the less favored wife of the king, King Uttanapad. And he was trying one day, as the king was sitting, and his other son, the son of his favorite queen, Suruchi, was on the king's lap. Little Dhruva was trying to get up on his father's lap as well, which is very natural. And his father was feeling wasn't feeling any way different to his son Dhruva, and he instinctively wanted to reach out to Dhruva and pick him up and put him on his lap. But at that very minute, Suruchi was just incensed with envy, and just by her body language, she was making it very clear that she did not want the king to reach out to Dhruva to pick him up. And as you know, she spoke very, very harsh words to Dhruva. And her harsh words totally broke Dhruva's heart. And what did she say? She said that, if you have a desire to sit on your father's lap, that is not possible. And if you have a desire to become king, even that's not possible. In other words, everything was finished for Dhruva. She was making it very clear that he actually had no future, neither as a son of the king, who was rightfully his father, nor as the future king, which was really his claim. He was being the elder, he had claim to the throne. So being very weak at heart, the king forgot his religious principles, and he did not chastise her or say anything to her, and did not reach out to Dhruva. Seeing his father's attitude, Dhruva became very, very unhappy and became actually very angry. It says in one of the texts early on, it says that he felt, like a snake, is when he's agitated, and is ready to bite. He was hissing like a snake due to anger. When a snake gets angry, he starts hissing. And he was hissing like a snake. So that analogy is very interesting, and that can be discussed briefly. And Dhruva, he went to his mother, as we know. His mother was shocked, and she, of course, she could not really know anything because Dhruva was hysterical. And when she found that what happened from the guards, then she became very, very sad as well. So we have to understand how the study of Bhagavatam really becomes effective through the study of analogies and through the study of analogies. Just 1 second, please. So we can do that through the study of analogies. And that becomes a very effective way of teaching the abstract concepts that is presented in the Bhagavatam. Today in schools, a great effort is being made to teach children these concepts, these abstract concepts. And this is so easily taught because it helps in the critical thinking skills. And this is so easily taught through Bhagavatam, and through the study of these different analogies. I mentioned in my seminar some time ago that these analogies helps in understanding very difficult spiritual concepts through material examples. Right? And for example, we heard about, for example, how to teach children different concepts, like simple analogies, like when Prabhupada says that he is the mailman who simply delivers the letter. A mailman doesn't open a letter, right? This is a very picturesque metaphor where the child can use his imagination to think of a mailman who delivers letters, and how Prabhupada is compared to a mailman because he doesn't open the letter. He doesn't change what Krishna is saying, right? So the other one, this is called a metaphor, right? The other is like a figurative speech where one is, for example, when devotee bhakti is compared to a seed, a seed, a devotional seed. When we water the seed through the process of hearing and chanting, it grows into a creeper, which becomes longer and longer and ultimately finds shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. Right? It's so picturesque, it's so figurative, right? So these analogies help the child just open up their imagination and their creative abilities. And it helps in their understanding of language, of language skills, as well as in terms of understanding difficult concepts through easy examples. And as a child gets older, these analogies get more and more difficult, and he's able to grasp them. It's amazing. If you start the children out with Bhagavatam early on, by the time they're 6 and 7, they can actually understand very deep concepts, very, very deep concepts. For example, there's an analogy that Prabhupada mentions of, how the subtle body, at the time of death, the subtle body leaves the gross body and goes into another body. It's the subtle body that carries the soul into another body. Now, the subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, and ego, and the mind is where all the material desires are contained. And so, naturally, whatever our desires are at the time of death, the subtle body carries those desires, and in this way, we get a new body. So that is very wonderfully explained by Prabhupada in the analogy of how when we sleep, and we are dreaming, we're dreaming that we are somewhere in this beautiful place, maybe flying, on top of a mountain or something. So how the subtle body, our physical body is lying down, but our subtle body is taking that soul, that carries the soul into that body. And then because the body is not dead and is still alive, the subtle body brings the soul back and we wake up. You see, it was really a very nice way to explain how that happens, So, so you see, this now this analogy is getting more and more difficult. From easy, it's becoming more and more difficult. But these concepts are easier to understand through these analogies, metaphors, and things like that, right? So there's one other example of, of a coconut. I may have mentioned that, how a coconut, an unripe coconut, is solid, one piece. Whereas a ripe coconut, the inner pulp separates from the outer shell, right? So this is when a devotee matures in spiritual life, he separates from his material body, right? So it's very nice, it's very picturesque. The child understands. You could even have a coconut in front of you, and you can see how the body, the material body, separates. He leaves behind the material body, and his body becomes spiritual. So things like that, very, very, and of course the basic analogy of the car and the driver compared to the difference between the body and soul. That we keep hearing that, but it helps develop the foundational principles of Krishna consciousness for children. Right? So we should not be afraid of tackling these examples. Should not be afraid of tackling these analogies. Not think, okay, well, we need to skip it because this may be too difficult for the children to understand. No, as teachers, let us take the time out and understand these analogies and learn the process of how to present it. Because children in the process will become very, very intelligent. Not only are they going to understand difficult spiritual concepts and develop their faith and identity as devotees, not only that, and also help in the process of becoming pure devotees, but also they will be able to understand, the process of, develop their intellect, their ability for good reasoning, logic, and they will actually become good at, at debate. Actually, even when we put challenges to them, because it's sharpening a part of the brain which wants to reason and think. Okay, so that's another aspect of how we develop this ability in them to debate, to argue, to to put up a good fight, good fight with those who do not believe in God, the atheists, with those who are Mayavadis, to those who are mental speculators, to those, people like that, to hardcore materialists, how to present an argument. And there's a side in our children, all children who love to fight, right? So how do we engage this quality of challenge and fighting that these children have is through the process of discussion, through the process of debate, of playing devil's advocate. Right? I mentioned that earlier in my seminar, right? So we do this process through Bhagavatam. And what will happen in the real world, what will happen is that they will not take anything lying down. They will not will not do blind thinking. Later on, as they go in college, everything that taught there is on the level of impersonalism. When my children went to college, and had to take a philosophy class, humanities class. It was shocking. All the philosophy was basically impersonalist, and the way they presented and the way, it's very attractive, and it's very, it feels very, very right. Right? It's easy to fall prey to them and think that, well, this is, everybody believes in this, so it must be true, right? But with the training that Bhagavatam gives, children are not going to take that lying down, right? Because of the training that you're giving them from day on. Right? So, and this quality of impulsivism is not only just when they take classes. This quality of this impulsivism that's permeating in every aspect of society, it can permeate in their own personal lives and in their dealings with others. Everything is becoming so automated. Everything is becoming so impersonal. And so children who are raised with this kind of study, they become very personal by nature. They become very compassionate. They see people as not as machines, but as people. They develop, for example, in the story of Dhruva, the quality of compassion, the quality of gratefulness. All these things are so clearly shown, right? So coming back to the story of Dhruva, so we have this contrast of Dhruva's mother, real mother, Suniti's, versus Dhruva's stepmother, right? That contrast is clearly there. I remember when I did this with many, many groups of children over the years, then we discussed so many things, the quality of envy, of course, how bad envy is, versus the quality of compassion, and that was displayed by Suniti. Right? One of the questions that children came up with, I think in one of my seminars, a mother asked was, how come Uttanapad had 2 wives? What is this concept of stepmother? And the parent was saying that she didn't know what to say. Like, it was a very odd question, how to explain why a man gets married to 2 people, 2 women, right? It becomes a little complicated, right? But we see in today's society, at least in America, a lot, that how people get married and they leave their wife, and they get married to another. And so a child grows up having 2 mothers. One real mother who's been, who's already gone, and, who is not married to his father anymore, and then his stepmother. So this concept of having a stepmother and many brothers, so many half brothers and things, are very much prominent in society today. So, and the child going to school is exposed to that, where he has a friend who says, well, his mother's living with somebody else, and his stepmother lives with him. So this concept is not unusual. And then, of course, we explain the actual why the king is allowed to marry more than one wife, right? And how these kings were very, very responsible, where they were able to take care of all their wives, and for example, in Vedic culture, polygamy was only allowed when there was respect for women. Polygamy was never allowed when women are disrespected, which we see in today's society, right? When a man goes through many, many women and discards one after another, then that's not out of respect, but it's just the other way around. It's disrespect. So in other words, these are the deeper aspects. Of course, you may not be able to for the child to understand these things, but they were done under great responsibility, with full care, with full responsibility of taking care of the king, took care of all of his wives. And he treated them equally, mostly, but we have stories like this. Right? And this is human nature, the frailty of human nature. So these things can be explained to the children. We don't have to shy away from them. We see their level, we see what they can accept, but it's amazing. Sometimes we really don't give our children enough credit for being able to understand that world is not black and white, but instead the world is many shades of gray. So to understand the nature of this world, through the eyes of Shastra is a much better way than to actually experience it, right? So if you learn about the frailties of human nature that we see again and again in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and how each one with that frailty is able to overcome that frailty and to actually become successful after that, that is the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. We don't shy away, we don't hide them from these frailties, but rather we tackle them. And because these stories are not are very selective, you know, Srimad Bhagavatam is not a chronological history of Vedic history, but rather is the history of great personalities, only special great personalities that we can learn from and perfect our life, right? So in this way, the stories are meant for the children to be able to actually learn through them, to see these, to see some of these personalities as frail, but at the same time to be able to overcome their frailty. Right? So one thing I want to emphasize is that don't be afraid or shy of any issue that comes up. Tackle it, because the world will show them anyway, especially if they're going to school and even if they're at home. The world is designed in such a way that one will face these things no matter what. And hearing from Shastra gives a proper perspective. Okay, so that's one thing. And then there's other questions that come up, right? The quality of, why Suruchi suffered a heavy reaction, but the king did not. And that's a very deep point in the story, isn't it? And believe it or not, as you're doing that first chapter or the second chapter, you'll see how children will come up with these questions. Now, these are only a few questions that I have here, very few. There's many, many more, right? So, and in fact, it will be the children. You should have Bhagavatam in such a way the child is thinking, well, why did the king marry more than one wife? Oh, why did the king, why did Suruchi? I get this question all the time from children. Why did Suruchi have to die and Uttama have to die? Why did Uttama have to die? After all, he was a little boy. He didn't do anything, So all these things, and these are, not easy answers, right? Of course, Suruchi, we understand, it was a heavy reaction, for something very serious that she did. And there's so many lessons there, right? She suffered this reaction because of her offense to Dhruva at a time that she didn't even know that Dhruva was such a great soul. But yet we understand from that lesson that when we make offenses to a devotee, even if the devotee may be a child, we will suffer reaction for that because we don't know who these children are, what kind of great souls they are. Right? So many things open up. Suruchi, she suffers a heavy reaction, but the king does not suffer. Why? Because he was very remorseful. But we don't hear of Suruchi being remorseful, right? The king left his kingdom. He was lamenting day and night. All he could think of was his little Dhruva. Right? He left all attraction to ruling, to kingdom, everything. He was very remorseful. And in the beginning, we did hear about him naturally wanting to give the same affection to Dhruva, but he was stopped by, due to weakness of heart, right? So the king doesn't, right? And then, of course, we hear Uttama also dying, but that's Krishna's desire. Ultimately, is Krishna's will, how he wants to play the cards, right? So ultimately, the question comes that ultimately, even the reaction is up to Krishna. We all have to suffer some karma, but the reaction, what Krishna does with that karma is up to him, right? So in this way, the children learn that ultimately we can't find the cause for everything because Krishna is Krishna's desire. And there's many examples in scriptures where even the great demigods bow down when Krishna desires something. For example, when when in the story of Ritasura, when the demigods were losing, then it was Ritasura. Then what was I saying? Yeah, when the demigods were losing, then at that time they went to Brahma and they wanted to get some help. And Brahma said, well, you've already done the offense. Indra has already done the offense of offending his spiritual master Brihaspati. Now you have to just wait for the time when Krishna decides to reverse those results. So you have to suffer the consequences, right? The demigods understand that now it's up to Krishna. There's nothing they can do. Even though they are so powerful administrators, they're actually helpless in front of the Lord. Right? Okay, so then we hear about, this way we can go on and learn these nice lessons, right? So we hear about Suniti, how she established parampara, how so expertly we see in the character of Suniti, not only her childish innocence, where she directs Dhruva to the forest and she says, well, I've heard that great sages go and do penance in the forest, so you should also go there. So she's heard that sages go to Madhuvan and they pray to Krishna over there. So she's directing to Krishna, Dhruva to the forest from hearing what she has heard, right? So she's a simple lady, but at the same time, she's very, very sharp. She understands that she develops that faith in her son that that if he has material desires, if he wants to ascend to the throne, he must take help from Krishna. He must go and please Krishna. She's understood that. Her integrity towards Krishna, her chastity towards Krishna is unparalleled. And she directs her son accordingly. So this is a point that comes very, very deep. And we teach our children how chastity to Krishna is ultimately the best chastity. Because of her chastity towards Krishna, because of her faith that only Krishna can solve her problem, she saved her son from committing many from his suffering, basically, right? Her faith in Krishna. She was able, so we learn from the story that ultimately the solution to all material problems is spiritual solution, is surrender to Krishna. And here we see that clearly, a problem that is materially overwhelming. None of us are ever going to experience anything even close to that, right? She was rejected by the king. Her son was also rejected by the king, And here we see how, a totally desperate situation for her. And yet she took that very unfortunate situation and made it so very fortunate. So we teach our children how no matter what kind of problems we have, we should see it as the mercy of the Lord. We should see it as the will of the Lord. And if we just turn towards him, then Krishna will help. So, and here in one of the purports, Prabhupada describes how Suniti is telling Dhruva that, look, as a mother, I cannot help you. I'm helpless. I'm the rejected queen of your father. But if you go to Krishna, he's equal to millions of mothers. And the child starts thinking, wow, I have this mother and I love her so much and she's my mother. But Krishna is like millions of mothers who can fulfill every kind of desire. So in this way, the child his faith in Krishna is getting deeper and deeper and deeper, right? Through this story, where he understands that ultimately there's no greater, kinder master than Krishna. Because look at Krishna, what he did versus Suniti. He gave him everything that he wanted materially, and then also everything spiritually. So, so in this way, we can take the children step by step through this whole thing, through the whole story. Right? And then, of course, there's other comments here that I would like to make, just a couple more. For example, Lamentation. We hear in one of the purports in the first chapter how instead of just lamenting, when Dhruva came running to his mother could have just cried and getting frustrated and told Dhruva, when you grow up, then you can fight back. This is really mean what your father is doing and what your stepmother is doing. She could have been frustrated. She could have been angry. No, instead she directed him to the right path. She said, look, your father, your grandfather, Swambhu Manu, he became Manu only because of his austerities and pleasing the Lord. He got everything material. He became the grandfather, he became the Manu of this entire universe. Right? Look at your great-grandfather. Through his austerities, he has the entire universe at his command. So even you, if you do austerities, you can please the Lord, right? So instead of lamenting, she directs him to make something out of his sadness, out of his disappointment, to actually become, to actually engage in Krishna's service. So the children learn determination. Of course, one of the lessons we learn from the Dhruva story is determination. And then the last question can be for more older children, Suniti, how she became glorified, how ultimately no material situation can be a detriment for any devotee. If he has faith in Krishna, if he has chastity for Krishna, no living entity, no matter how bad her material or his material circumstances may be, is really neglected if she or he is not neglected by the Lord. When one is neglected by the Lord himself, that would be considered the greatest misfortune. So in this way, we see that how the biggest impediment in life can be a source of great encouragement for the devotee. So I think I will stop here and see if anybody has any questions. I thought I was going to read all the different verses to you and take you through, but I think it's just going to take a lot of time. So I decided to, do it like this, just discuss the general points of how we can do this. So this is learning the spiritual lessons, how in general we learn these lessons. And there's many more. Don't be envious of others. If you desire something, ask Krishna. Tolerate and act with integrity. Integrity means integrity towards Krishna. In other words, at no point did the mother and son forget Krishna. At no point, right? And what was the result? Dhruva went back to Godhead, and so did his mother. Okay? So it's a great lesson for us mothers and fathers that if we give a right training to our children, right? If we teach them through Shastra, then not only do they benefit, but we also benefit in the process. Right? Be determined and focused. By devotional service, we can change the whole world. Krishna is very kind and compassionate. And these are only a few. Like I said, there's many, many more of these lessons. So anyone who may have read this chapter 8, if you have any things that you wanted to ask, maybe you noted the points or something and you would like to ask at this point, please feel free to do that now. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mataji, thank you so much for the wonderful demo class. We request the participants to kindly raise your hands virtually in case you have any doubts or queries. Rajani Mataji, can you please unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Mataji, please can I ask you a question regarding the previous class which you had given teaching Bhagavatam?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's all related, so it's not a problem. Yeah. Yes.
Mataji, my son is 4.5 years old and I tell him stories from small books like of Vaikunta Enterprises. There are small books of Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj, and I've started like that. So for him, can I continue the same, or should I start with Bhagavatam? He's just 4.5 years old.
Oh yeah, it's okay because he's very young, and so I mean, at 4.5, I do begin from Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam. So you can try that as well and see, because what you do is he cannot read, but you can read to him and then explain. Frequently stop and paraphrase and explain what you're reading with a very active, in a very imaginative way. You can, with kind of actions and things also. Like I think I played a video audio last time of a group in London that was doing it for very young children, where they, where they acted out and things. So you can actually do where you can actually do an acting out with the child and bringing home those points, or you speak in a way that is very dramatical. So in this way, you get the benefit of reading from Srila Prabhupada's books. Right? You get that benefit from, because these books of Srila Prabhupada, they're very, very potent. They're actually very potent. So when you read directly from them, the power that you experience, the reciprocation that you experience is a lot more, you see, because of the nature of these potency of these books. So I would encourage, if you can do it, it may not be very long. Even with those other books, I'm sure you cannot do too long at a time anyway, right? So why not do with Srila Prabhupada's book? Yeah, so take some action-filled story, to get him to also get excited. For example, you could do, Dhruva's story is great, because the child does feel very, very heavily for little Dhruva and feels, oh, look at what happened to him, and feels that, pain. And then, of course, it's exciting also because he leaves home and all that. So, or you can do the story of Gajendra and the crocodile, right? You can do that story. Or you can do the story of Prahlad, So there's many, many stories like that. So I would see if you can do that,
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much.
I request Shweta Gopi Mataji to kindly raise a question.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Mataji, I would like to ask you, in today's lecture, you were speaking about the karma which came about on the Suruchi and his son Uttanapad. So Suruchi, as you said, that it was a little bit, we can understand that, the karma part, how it affected. But then when we have this question, of course, even I had this question when you were speaking, that how about the son Uttanapad?
Yeah. You mean the son Uttama?
Sorry, yeah, the son Uttama.
The son Uttama. Yeah. So the point is that, Suruchi, due to her son's death, she became mad and she went to search for him, and then a forest fire consumed her, right? This is the story, how it goes. So obviously, her madness came after her son was dead, right? And then that led to her own death, right? So this is like part of Krishna's plan, right? To give heavy reaction to Suruchi. And then the way we explain that, we don't know what is Krishna's will and desire. We simply surrender to it, right? Like, for example, in the story of the Pandavas, they were going through so many reverses. At one point, even Yudhishthira Maharaj got shaken up and said, look, Krishna, we're totally surrendered to you. But yet we see that we are suffering all these reverses in life, and how is it? And at that point, Krishna says that when I'm merciful to someone, I give it whatever they want. But when I'm very, very merciful to someone, I give my special favor, then I take things away from them. You see? So in other words, ultimately it's up to Krishna, and a devotee simply surrenders, because we cannot fathom to know everything what Krishna desires. You see? So it's Krishna's way of being merciful to Suruchi, in a way, because that led to her purification, in a way, So, and how Krishna designs that, how Krishna plans that out, nobody can know. Okay?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Mataji. Mataji, one more question. Even the other devotees want to ask is that Mataji, like, what do you? How can we decide? Is it upon the age of the child or maybe the understanding that do we take the story forms of Srimad Bhagavatam? The main stories, the randomly or chapter by chapter.
Okay, yes. Yeah. So it depends on the development of the child. If the child is being exposed to Bhagavatam, just is new to Bhagavatam or just being exposed to it, then we do from the stories, because then starting from the first canto will be a little difficult because there's fewer stories. I mean, there's a lot of stories in the first canto as well. We have the story of Narad Muni and Vyasadeva. And towards the end we have the Queen Kunti's prayer, Bhishma passing away, and all these things are there. However, in the beginning, in the early on in the chapters, it's difficult because there's a lot more philosophy than stories. So in the beginning, what I suggest is that you start with the story, and then when you see that the child is developing a great attraction to the process of understanding these deeper points, then you could go to Canto 1, Chapter 1. Just give yourself a little time, do a few stories, develop that attraction in the children, and then the child will have no problem doing Canto 1, Chapter 1. But if you want to do Canto 1, Chapter 1, it can be done, if you want to begin. Then I would say we have many nice guidebooks that we are creating for different cantos, and you can use them for help. Actually, right now we're working on Canto 4, and the story of Dhruva, that we discussed today, the first chapter, we already have it. We already have worked on it. In fact, we're halfway through the fourth canto. So we have 3 cantos already done. So if anybody wants to do that, it's just that when it's so much philosophy, you have to really be very creative. And the guidebook is of great help, the Srimad Bhagavatam guidebook, because it gives that philosophy through the form of stories. It helps with that. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Mataji.
I would like to request Medhavni Mataji to please raise a question.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for the very wonderful session. Like as always, it was very useful. So I had a question that, my daughters are 14 and 11, and all 4 of us actually read one book. Like one person reads Chaitanya Charitamrita, one person reads Bhagavad Gita, one person reads Bhagavatam. We try to cover one verse, translation and purport. So we've been doing that for quite some time now. But what I realize is that sometimes it gets like quite mechanical, because sometimes nobody wants to share anything, and because we've been doing it for quite some time now, and the children they know the concept, and so how do we maintain the enthusiasm to read and share, Mataji? Because they go to Gopal's Garden School, so they know the fundamentals and everything, but then as we read together, sometimes they don't want to share any points. Sometimes you have to prod, and they say that we've read today, like that. It becomes a little mechanical. So how do we like create that enthusiasm and keep it up, Mataji? Can you suggest some?
Yeah. So is the process like going fast, or is it just one verse that you're discussing?
So what we depends on like the purport is long, then we do like the purport is about a page or so, then we do one verse translation and purport. But if it is a Bhagavad Gita shloka or Chaitanya Charitamrita, generally in the initial we are in Adi Leela, we've just started we are in the 5th chapter. So there are no purports actually. So we do 2-3 verses together, because the initial verses are Jai Jai Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, that one, So we just read all about 10 verses, but there are no purports at all. So it is just like you read 10 verses and the translation, and then you finish. One person finishes, and then I read the Bhagavad Gita. So we are in the 4th chapter. So we've read the Bhagavad Gita before also, so we are just doing a second. We are actually doing the 3rd time of the Bhagavad Gita. So they don't, and then the next person, like Prabhuji starts Bhagavatam. We are doing the 2nd canto of Bhagavatam. So wherever there's a long purport, then if there's something to discuss, they say something. Otherwise, they say, yeah, we already read this, so we can just quickly go ahead. So there are no. So sometimes it becomes like sounds a little mechanical that we are just reading one or two verses, and we know that we have the knowledge because we've read it, but then that enthusiasm to discuss and to get more realizations, that is not happening, Mataji. So what is it that we are lacking?
Yeah, yeah. So I think what happens is that with children, they need to keep moving. And so if you have just one verse that you're doing and opening it for discussion, that becomes harder because they're children. And if there's a story that keeps going and moving, then you can you can trap their attention much more effectively and get them to think more, and to question and to raise questions and to raise comments. So these things happen more easily when we are moving along, and also and relating it to their life, to the character within that story, where they can identify with some things, or at least they can find the story engaging, you see. So and we don't need to yeah, so I would recommend something like that rather than just focusing on one verse. And so so if you plan ahead of time and you prepare ahead of time, then it becomes easier for the teacher, because then you realize, well, this is what we're going to cover today, and these are some of the points I'm going to bring up. So you're prepared that, okay, and the points naturally have to be very engaging and very interesting and also very instructive. So is this in a school that you're talking? Are you a teacher at school? Yeah.
Oh, no, Mataji. So I'm just doing it, for my daughters, 14 and 11 years old. And the four of us, like Prabhuji, me, my daughters, Danya and Daita, we sit together because that's the last thing we do before we go to sleep. So morning we're chanting, and night this is just like a sandwich method which we've adopted. But somehow we feel that in the night it's become like a ritual now. We just read and then we sleep. So sometimes the realizations don't come through, and sometimes it seems to me that we are just reading for the sake of reading. And generally when we are reading all the 4 books, sometimes the purport is completely philosophy, and and sometimes I feel that they know more than me. So I'm like, you tell some points what you know and all that, but they are like, mommy, we already read this, so this is the understanding, so let's move forward, like that, Mataji. So that enthusiasm is kind of deteriorating. So
well, like I mentioned, if you try this method, maybe that will work better. Okay, so just try this method that I'm, try this and see, because it's more engaging and it helps, and give everybody turns to read, keep them engaged, and in the participation. In participating with the story, so that will really help. Okay.
Okay, Mataji. But sometimes there is no storyline that is actually coming, right? Like
Well,
especially
then you have to become creative. You have to think of different things, where you can discuss, through, like I mentioned earlier, through examples and things. You have to make it more interesting for them through different examples, how you're going to catch their curiosity, how you're going to bring them in to identify with these things, and to so you have to just make it very attractive to them. So you read ahead of time and see how you can make it attractive. Just, because these are your children, and you can understand and what works for them. So you just have to employ those things. This process works for everyone all the time. I have hundreds of devotees who are doing this, and of course process can be changed, to suit yourself. But basically the idea is the same, that we engage them and present it in a way that becomes very interesting to them. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mataji. Mataji, in the initial stages, you said you didn't have the time to prepare ahead because you also, learned along with your sons, studied together. So can you share some tips of those days when you actually...
Yeah, so the key thing is to make it interesting. And that is the art a mother or father knows naturally. You don't have to go to school to understand what works for your children. Okay, so if you haven't had the time to prepare, then it still works. But you have to make it into a way that attracts them. Just like a mother with a small child, she immediately thinks of creative ways of how to make the child happy, right? And how to engage the child so the child starts crying. So it's those techniques which just comes natural. Okay, if this is the concept about a dry, so-called dry concept, how to make it more interesting. Just use your imagination, just even talking about the body and soul. There's so many different ways one can talk about that. And it always helps to get inspired yourself. If you're not inspired, then obviously it becomes harder. So while you're cooking or doing your work, you can hear a class or something, get inspired, hear. And then when the inspiration is there, the next tendency is that you want to share. And who can be better people to share than your own children? I see the parents, who are engaged in teaching Bhagavatam and these scriptures to their children. They're very inspired because it's like constant preaching. It's like constant, not preaching to them. I don't mean it in that way, but rather through these beautiful stories, So maybe there's lack of inspiration on your part. So maybe you can increase that, And because the children are so much older, I'm sure you have some time to get inspired yourself. And then it becomes very natural.
I would request Venkatesh Prabhu to kindly ask his question.
Able to unmute. Yeah. Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranams.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Mataji, for this wonderful session and the faith you have in Prabhupada books.
Thank you, Prabhu. Prabhu, you have a question?
Seems he's got logged out, Mataji.
Okay.
So, till he logs back in, I would like to make an announcement to everyone. We are having parents also here, Mataji. So, under the guidance of Her Grace Aruddha Mataji, we are starting the Srimad Bhagavatam class for kids aged between 7 to 15 years. Interested parents can register the kids on the link given in the chat box, and we'll roll out the links or even on WhatsApp groups. So we hopefully we'll be starting from next week. And we have limited admissions, so then kindly register. It'll be on first come, first serve basis. Thank you. Venkatesh Prabhu is back. I'll just put it.
Yeah, the other thing I want to also say that I'm, if the teachers are making these groups to teach once a week to the children, I'm willing to come every week and discuss that chapter with you and give you some pointers and give you some, clues of how to do it. I'll be happy to do that. So, but for teachers who are actively going to be doing this with their children, or even for parents who are who actively want to do weekly, every week they follow that chapter every week. So I'm open, I'm available for that.
Yeah. Hare Krishna Mataji, I'm back. Yes, Mataji. My question was, if now we have seen that devotee children are quite interested in these stories and they are able to pick up well and they have faith. But what is your opinion on presenting this kind of a format to a group of non-devotee children who might be like their parents might want these children to take part in this kind of an activity under some value education kind of an banner? But then will they be able to pick up, Mataji? What is your experience on this? And if yes, then how is it different from presenting to a group of devotee children?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, it can be done with the non-devotee children completely the same way. The process is the same, except when we can see that the children's knowledge of Krishna is a lot less. Then you accordingly you adapt it. You accordingly you make your classes in a way that's more developing their faith rather than going into very deep aspects of Krishna, of the points, that is coming up. You just have to adjust accordingly. But the process is the same. And actually, I've done it with non-devotee children, and because it's the soul that is being attracted, it's actually they're able to respond in a very, very genuine and very, very sincere way. So I really don't see much of a difference in the teaching process between from devotee children to non-devotee children, Prabhu.
Machi, there's one question on the chat box.
Yes.
Yamini Mataji wants to ask how to train Srimad Bhagavatam stories for my 2.9 years old twin boys.
Yeah, that's almost 3 years old, right? 3 months less. Yeah. So again, that age children can respond a lot to, things like pictures in the books and to art projects. Presenting the philosophy through art and art projects is a great way. And then the Srimad Bhagavatam guidebooks that our team is putting together is very handy in that respect, because you'll get ideas for those activities which you can simplify for younger children and make it more mature, advanced for older children. Those same activities can be done. For example, in the first chapter, where Sutta Goswami is nominated captain of the ship, then there's an activity where the children actually make a ship, and they float it on the water. So they get the point that, wow, and of course they've gone through the entire chapter where all the qualifications of Sutta Goswami is being enumerated, why he's qualified to become the teacher, the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam is because of different points that we've already discussed in a very nice, demonstrative, and interesting way. How he's submissive to his spiritual master, how he's well-versed in all the Shastra, all these qualities are there. So he becomes nominated. So you can make it very dramatic, also. How Sutta Goswami is actually the captain of the ship of the boat of Krishna consciousness. So we make a ship. So you see, a 3-year-old can, and that's what they do in London, in the Baby Bhagavatam group. Every week they present it to this age group, where they're explaining these concepts, these difficult philosophical concepts through fun activities. Okay, so Krishna consciousness, and I mean, it's just so much fun, and the child never forgets that. Wow, the sages were there in the first chapter. They're sitting there in this forest of Naimisharanya with Sutta Goswami as their leader. And what is Sutta Goswami doing? He's reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, and he's very qualified. So again, you're creating that picture. You can make an art project. On a big sheet of paper, you can draw a forest of Naimisharanya or talk to him about it. So many wonderful imaginative ways. And don't think it's a waste of time because the child is so small. Anything about Krishna is absolute, and it goes straight to the heart, and is helping. It's relating to the soul, and the soul has no age or gender or anything, right? So you're speaking to that soul, within that body. So even a small child, who can relate to this, can benefit, can make advancement, through this process of, through the process of activities. Okay, just using your imagination, and believe me, the time that you spend doing this with your little children, then that will make you inspired. You see, as well. So if you have 1 hour in the day, well, spend it something like that. Okay, and there's so many other creative ways you can do it.
Mataji, Achyut Prabhu has a question. I would like him to unmute himself and ask.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Sorry, I opened this meeting with my kid's name. His name is Achyut. Actually, I have a question.
Sorry for that.
Yeah, my son is less than 5 years old, and I want to know in which language we should tell him a Bhagavatam, in our mother tongue, or shall we go with English?
Well, if you're living in India, then you can, if English medium is the medium that they are learning in school, then I would definitely try to do from Prabhupada's original book, which is in English, and teach from that book. However, teaching from in your own mother tongue from a book that's been translated is also okay. It's also okay. But if you have if you are comfortable with English, then I would go ahead and do that. Okay, because it will just come in very handy in all aspects. Not just spiritual, but also material aspects. But there's no harm if you want to do it in your mother tongue. But even when you're doing it in English, in order to explain them well, you may have to discuss it in your own mother tongue. So you can flip back and forth. You can read the translations from Srila Prabhupada's book in English, but then as you explain to them and go deep, in order to get the point across, you can speak in your mother tongue. So you can do a combination of both English and your mother tongue. Okay?
If anyone else has any questions, kindly feel free to raise your hand and ask.
Hare Krishna. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, yes.
I'm really sorry, Mataji. I had another question. I just wanted to request you that, Mataji, I tried purchasing your book, which you spoke just now about guidelines for parents for Bhagavatam. I was just trying to purchase it on Amazon, but it is not available. So what can I do, Mataji? I wanted to purchase that book.
Yeah, what's happening is, due to the COVID situation, things are so volatile. It's really difficult. But what I'm doing that within a month, you should be able to get these books from a publisher in India. So who's publishing the books now. So if you can just wait for a month, we are going through that process, and I can, we can, and then it will be available. And you can all make you can come together and make a bulk order, or you can ask individually. Everything will be available in India at a lot cheaper price, unbelievable price. I believe this publisher is working on that. Okay. I wanted to show you the screen of all the books we have. Let's see if I can do that. Somehow my screen is stuck. I'm not able to. So, and in the meantime, somebody can ask me a question, if there is any, Okay. Here are the books that are available. Well, it's not showing all the books, unfortunately, but, but there's Canto 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 is here, but the second volume of 3 is also there. So these are the books that will be available after a month. Okay.
Okay, Mataji. Okay, Mataji. Thanks a lot, Mataji, for enlightening us. Thanks a lot. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, Hare Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna. I think we should conclude now, Mataji. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mataji, for your valuable time and such deep.
I just wanted to hear. I wanted to hear from the teachers. Are they making? If they are making the groups, then I didn't hear anything from the teachers as yet. Are they there?
Yes, Mataji, the teachers are there with us.
Okay.
If you all want to add in something, teachers of our group, please.
I think everybody is very shy.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Dandot Pranam.
Yeah. Dandavat, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for a wonderful session. My name is Srinivas. We discussed last time once on a WhatsApp call with Geeta Mataji, if you remember. So we started a new batch.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So we started a new batch. I am conducting those batches. So there is one batch wherein the number of students is basically around 15. So it was in between, basically. If we had more, then I would have split into 2. And it's 15. I can't do 2 also and then One is
Yes.
also not that challenging. I'm able to manage, but I just wanted to know if is it fine, because I am ensuring all the kids will get chance to read. So that amount of tempo I'm maintaining, so that all
Yes.
the at least 15 slokas are covered, so that 15 kids can get the chance to read.
Yes.
But is that
To do
fine,
that.
Mataji?
Yes, yes, Prabhu. It's just one has to just go by, instinct. Like, okay, 15 verses. That's pretty good, because if there's enough discussion that needs to be done within those 15 verses, they just get to read once. But many times it happens that you cover 30 verses because there's not much of discussion that needs to be done. Then don't hesitate to do another round of reading. This is my mood also when I do it. It's like I make sure that nobody gets left out in the reading. Somehow everybody gets, if we're making one turn, then everybody gets to read one turn, otherwise 2 turns, so that everybody feels satisfied. And that you have to judge depending on the amount of discussion that you can do, within those verses. So this
Yes,
is fine.
Mataji.
As long as you keep their interest going and they are enlivened and they keep coming back every week for more and more, then you're doing well. You see, this is your guideline.
Okay, okay. Just one more thing, Mataji,
Yeah.
that regarding asking the kids to share their realizations. So generally, initially I was thinking, we'll cover everything and do it towards the end, but then I realized that's not working. So
Yeah.
ideally, during the shloka only, if it is some interesting point, then and there itself, I ask the kids to share any points around this. I'm not just restricting it, okay, towards the end, if you can share something like this. Is that fine, Mataji?
Yes. Yeah, this is really good what you're doing. Yes. Sometimes we cannot have realizations class after each class, okay? And generally what happens is when you finish the one chapter, like chapter 8, then the last class can be only realization class, where you ask the children to think of different points and to jot it down and then speak up in the realization class. That is also very effective, where you have a separate class for simply realizations class, and the children have had all week to think about it and to write down some points, so and that's the end of the chapter. So, and it's amazing the type of realizations that come across. Now during the class, like you said, it's good to just do comments and discussion while you're doing the class, where if you see a child is not speaking too much, then you can as he's reading the verse, you can say, well, do you want to explain what this means? So the child gets excited and thinks, wow, and then he tries. Sometimes he doesn't know what to say, so he simply repeats the translation, what Prabhupada has given, right, as it is.
Yes.
That's okay. You see, they'll do all that, but that's okay. The point is that you want to encourage the children to be active participants, and you
Speak
want
out. Yeah.
to speak out, to lose their shyness in being able to think about it, think it through, and to feel and to create, and to answer questions and to make comments. And you're developing their confidence in being devotees and being in their ability to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, you see?
Yeah. Yes, Mataji. Just one more question I'll ask.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Prabhu. Yeah, no problem.
So
Yeah.
there is one obsession I have is that all the kids should equally participate, but there are always some kids, at least you will find 2 or 3 maybe. Their answer would be generally yes, no, okay, that's it. They don't share anything, and they are active on the video. I can see them; they're smiling and everything, but they're not really opening up in terms of sharing some points or experiences. While many other kids are doing well, so I don't know how to tackle this.
Yeah, so there's it takes a while, and you'll see how these very children who are very shy, they actually start speaking out over time, because they feel more encouraged. And the key thing is to keep encouraging them, even if they've spoken like a line, and if you can get even a few sentences out, a few words out of them, you applaud that. You see, and that's the way. If they're feeling shy because they're lacking confidence in themselves, so you fan that, you encourage that confidence by praising whatever they say. It may be something very simple, but immediately applauding and encouraging them and making them feel they're such wonderful children, So as you keep encouraging, gradually they lose their shyness. And the other thing is, when you do videos, it's really hard, isn't it? Sometimes, because they do tend to get distracted with each other. and they watch each other. And
Yeah.
I don't know, does it happen with you or no?
I haven't noticed yet, but
Okay.
could be.
Yeah.
Because at
Sometimes
least
it also,
without videos, we have a feeling that it is much worse. That,
really, because I've been doing for years and years, and I only do audio.
oh, is
And
it? Okay.
yeah, I only do audio, and I'm able to grasp, get everybody's attention. I don't leave
Mm,
anybody outside.
okay.
If they are more shy by nature, then I don't push them very hard or anything like that. But they end up just over just a short period of time, they end up losing their shyness. Sometimes it takes longer, depending on the child.
Okay.
And so not every child will be the same, but but I know video is more exciting for the children because they want to, it's just something more. But what happens is the attention is diverted, and the process of hearing is very powerful. So when they just hear and not zone out, then it's the most effective. But then you can try. I'm not saying that doing video is not good. It's probably also will work, and it is working for all of you. But
Yeah.
you know what I mean. You can try both and see.
Revisit
Uh,
once and try once. I mean, that would be the best way to try out. But at least with
yeah,
the video, we are definitely getting good response. Kids are participating, and
really.
but that fact is also true that they could be just watching somebody else's video and then swiping here and there. Distractions are
Mhm.
possible. That's very valid.
And be very firm in that area. When they get distracted, just tell them. Don't be shy of telling them. You see, because you want to maintain that attention. And children need gentle reminders. They need sometimes strong reminders. It's okay, because ultimately, you then right after that you give them attention. Like they know that it's for their own good. That so they don't mind if you need to become a little stronger to get their attention. It's okay if that happens.
Okay.
But continue with the video. If it works, because I know it's also works very well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Mataji.
Isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I
Just
know
one more
Geeta.
question. Can I ask?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Sorry for so many questions, but
No, no, no.
so
It's good. Yeah.
So for actually we had received many subscriptions, and then based on the age we categorized it. So we came up with a teenagers batch, which is 12
Oh.
plus. So 12, 13, 14 till 15 I think we have, and slowly that batch also increased, and we have around 10 kids in teenagers batch. That we are doing it separately because we realized that initially it was a mix, and then we could clearly see a disconnect, and
Yeah.
the teacher actually gets confused. So should I go philosophical? That if I go philosophical, then the lower level kids are basically
Mm.
confused. And if we are too simple, then the higher level kids are kind of getting bored. So we thought we have to separate it. But at least post separation, I think it's really working well. So with the higher end kids that we have, teenagers, the discussion is quite philosophical. Like for example, the shloka where Dhruva desires to get a planet much higher than Brahmaji. So that's the point where I blowed up the 3 planetary systems and how it exactly happens. Where are we exactly? And
Good. Yes.
those points I blowed up, and they enjoyed it, and they were asking many questions. So how is this? And the Nabhi is there, and the Lord Vishnu is sitting over there. Okay, this is just one universe. Okay, there are many universes like that. Okay, so it became interesting. So
Mm.
just wanted to share some realizations.
No, this is wonderful what you're doing, because some visuals also help very much. They help to to get their attention and to fix their attention. It's very nice for what you're doing. It's just you're using all kinds of creative ways to attract the child. Teaching teenagers is the most fun. It's the most can be challenging, but also is so rewarding, isn't it? Because these children are at that age where they're trying to make sense of this world, and there's so many conflicting feelings. They've been going to school, and there's a certain different set of values over there, and what we are telling them and what we practice at home is a different set of values. How to make sense of all that. Then also content wise, it's so different in terms of science and things like that. So it's very challenging, but I found that through the study of Bhagavatam, this gap narrows, where children can really relate to their life as a devotee. They can make sense to the idea, to the fact, actually, it's okay to be a devotee. Yes, Prabhu. So it's very
Yes.
nice. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mataji. Thank you so much. We have your blessings. We'll try doing. Thank
No,
you.
this group that you're making in Pune, among all your teachers, and it's amazing. And I was encouraging other people, other parents to start, other devotees to start groups like that, of 10 to 12 children, of, like he's had 15 also. If you can divide them, then it's okay. And to start this systematic study of Srimad Bhagavatam with the children. And it becomes, and these parents and these teachers in Pune are really finding a lot of success in doing that. And here was one teacher, and there's other teachers, and Geeta Gokhale is trying to spearhead this whole thing. And she's willing to give these training sessions to anybody who's willing to do this. So please contact her, and I'm also at your disposal in case you need weekly help. So, but my request with everyone is to please take this up, and you'll find it so rewarding, not only for the children, for yourself. This will become the highlight of your week. It's just so rewarding, and please engage all these children in this very, very transcendental work, which pleases Srila Prabhupada so much. Teaching teenagers is so fruitful. I remember when I have several groups of teenage children, and the one thing that really stands out is you are really giving them so much conviction, because very soon they will fly their own nest. They will be out of their nest. Sorry, they will fly their own planes, right? And we would have very little influence on these children. So giving them this faith will really help. And I remember discussing all types of topics with them. Just openly, about girl-boy relationships, about householder life, or and so many things the children are shy to discuss, but also they're so confused about, right, Prabhu?
Yeah, yes, Mataji. Mataji, actually, this teenagers batch, we have kept the timing that we have kept is early morning, 7 o'clock, and many
Oh,
kids
really?
kind of struggling, but somehow we convince them and they come on time. That is very nice. We wanted to keep it early so that the waking up early habit, at least, we are kind of implementing it on that day at least.
Okay. Wow, that's ambitious. Ambitious program. But yeah, if you can do it, it's so nice in the morning. Yeah, and this is also, and the parents, you have the support, then I don't think it should be a problem. Otherwise, it could be a problem.
Yeah, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I
Very
would,
nice. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mataji.
Yes.
I would like to request Dipeshwari Damodar Priya Mataji to kindly raise her question. She's a teacher from our team, Mataji.
Oh, great.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandrat Pranams. I reside in Hyderabad currently. So
Okay.
I recently started this bedtime Krishna Katha for the kids here. So there's
Mm-hmm.
a Hyderabad congregation where I stay near Gachibowli. So we have few families. So the kids' age is like probably 8, less than 8, 5-year-old till 15-year-old max. So it's so nice to receive the response, and and I'm so happy to announce that there's so many artists and in our group. So I make like this PowerPoint presentation where I use a software called Prezi and make it more like animative and interesting. But it's so nice to actually, more than they learn, I feel like I'm more inspired and more I'm more inspired with the values and wisdom that they come out and they say, because kids are so
Yes.
pure. They don't say
Yes.
whatever they say. It definitely touches your heart. And one of the kids and I encourage elder kids at least once a week to share the stories to the younger kids, so the kids will get
Yes. Haribo, I lost you. Yeah, I think you got disconnected from us. This was really nice to hear from you, Mataji, that you're feeling so inspired. And that's what it does.
Yes.
Teachers are more inspired than the children. Yes. Go ahead, Mataji.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Mataji.
So nice you're doing this. And you're teaching them Bhagavatam, or what are you teaching them? I can't hear you. It's a bad connection.
Yeah, sorry, Mataji. So I started out like after Janmashtami, I started this group for bedtime Krishna Katha. So because as Prabhupada always encouraged to read before sleeping, so I'm doing this like 15 minutes before sleeping,
Okay.
like around 8:15, 8:20.
Oh,
So
nice.
so since it's so yeah, I shared them some other stories, where I come across, and I got a lot of inspiration from them,
Okay,
like
very nice.
Jagannath stories and all that, just like with pictures and videos. So they get really attracted to that. And
Very nice.
and the elder
Yes.
kids also are very inspiring, Mataji. It's so inspiring that like the wisdom they shared is just so heart touching, because they don't judge anyone, and as you grow up after teenage years, because the things you see around you, that biased nature or that prejudgmental nature automatically comes in. But when you're growing up, they don't have these mentalities, they don't have these biased mentalities. But I'm so happy I want to be a teacher. I hope I become a good teacher in the future. And thank you so much for your association, Mataji.
Very nice. Very good. Wonderful contribution to our children. Especially when I do remember that even the evening time also becomes a very good time to do Bhagavatams, because, and any other scripture, of course, is because children are done with the day and they're very much relaxed also, but not very late, but just enough where you can still, after dinner, then they're ready, to hear and to participate. Very nice.
Divya Ji, Mataji, I would like to request you to kindly raise a question.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. So I am also part of Geeta Gokhale Mataji's group. So we are doing these classes, but I have one question regarding what you answered to Srinivas Prabhuji, that we can have a realizations class only. So actually, when I do when I conduct this regular class and I ask the kids that what do you remember from the past class? So sometimes it's hard from their side, but when I give some hints, then they start picking it up and okay, yeah, we did this last time and like that. So for this realization class, like how do we do we give them do we tell them that you read by yourself, revise it and come, or how do we do it? Because it may be hard for them to recollect everything that has been happening from 2 months like that.
No, don't give them too much stress because of that. It should be something spontaneous that they liked, that they remember in all the chapters. What stood out for them, what is it that made a difference in their life, how did it change them. So it's more introspective rather than the details of what they liked. If they were to just tell us that, oh, I like this part when Dhruva goes to the forest and he meets Narad Muni, well, everybody knows that part, but what we want to hear from them is how what is it during that conversation that struck him the most, that struck the child the most, you see. So it's more like a personal realization, a personal reflection, rather than warn them that you don't want to hear the story or the story plot, what's happened and then this happens and that happens. No, you're not. In the realizations class, you want to hear from their reflection of the story, what they learned from the story, what affected their life, in terms of Dhruva, you see. Otherwise, they'll come with pages and pages of words, which is basically a repetition of of the story. And you can keep it effortless. Don't make it like a textbook, because then it's a lot for them. But you'll see, they'll come up with some amazing realizations, like the Mataji before this said, you just feel so inspired to hear from their innocent minds, but how much deeply they've taken. And sometimes their realization is as good as an adult realization. It's the same practically.
Yes, Mataji. Yeah, even I have experienced that more than the story, they like what they have learned from it, like
Yes.
not to be envious. That is what, like if one child says that, then many repeat also that yes, we also like this point that we should not be envious of others. So I also.
Yes. Yes. So anything else? Because one thing that the teachers can do in terms of this Dhruva chapter is to actually, make different things, make different points and to discuss them at the end of the chapter, all the different lessons that we learned from the story. So towards the end, the teacher can do something like that, like where I pointed out some of the different lessons, how she, how solutions to material desires, material problems have spiritual solutions, but not material solutions, things like that. And then we can put the different lessons that children learn from the story. And that kind of sums up everything, that that can, it helps develop kind of summarizes everything. So that's another way also to do. You can ask the children in one of the classes all the different lessons that they learned, and then to jot it down and bring it all together, the different lessons. And there's many, many lessons. If you want to teach them value-based education, that's a great way to do it. But not until they finished it. No.
I would request Radha Chandrika Mataji to raise a question, please.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you very much for your enlightening session. I have a question like, how do you structure your class? Like you said, you are having 10 batches of like 100 kids you are teaching Srimad Bhagavatam. So what is the structure you follow for a class?
Yeah, so what it is that I do one a day, and that's 1 hour class. So I don't take more than that. So I take out 1 hour of my day every day and teach one batch. So it's covered in this way. And every batch doesn't exactly have 10. There's some with 12, 13, so it adds up to like, close to 100. So in this way, I'm giving once a day, an hour, with so many groups like that. So, which is like, okay, about 100 would mean 10 groups or 9 groups like that. Well, there's more than 10 in each group, you see? So you can do the same. You can do an hour every day, and you can have 6 or 7 groups. You see?
Okay, my question is like, how do you go about that in 1 hour class? You will take Bhagavatam and make them go through the translations, because I haven't attended your the class, or I don't know how actually these classes are run. So I just want to get an idea what you do in the.
Yes, Mataji. What I was planning to read the verses as we go, but because we hadn't planned that every parent, whoever is there, can participate in that, and all of you read one verse each, it would have been a lot easier to do it that way. But what you do is you read the verse, the child reads the verse, and then in the pulpit, you ahead of time, you see the points that you think would be good for discussion. Okay, Mataji? And then you note it on the side of the page where, oh, this is the point I want to discuss. Okay? So you note it down. You note it down.
Okay.
For example, in one verse where Suniti talks about, she discourages Dhruva to go to any demigod, but instead to go to Krishna, for her problems. And to establish that point, she's bringing Paramparayan. She's bringing the example of his grandfather and his great-grandfather. See, they didn't go to anybody. They didn't go to the demigod, but they went to Krishna, and they pleased Krishna. Through their austerities, they pleased Krishna, and that's why Krishna rewarded them with so much, So in this way, she's establishing the fact that like your forefathers, you should also go to Krishna.
Okay.
And don't be sidetracked. You see, so from that verse and purport, you can do that, and that's text 21. So as you're going, you see, in the beginning, I encourage parents or teachers to read ahead of time, because then you establish your confidence. That person can mute herself, wherever the noise is coming from. Is there any way they can be muted or something? I don't know if you can. So in this way, that, you read the purpose. That's why I encourage parents or teachers to read it initially, at least, so that you develop the confidence of this process of how to discuss. Because once you've read it and you say, wow, yeah, this is a great point to discuss, that one should, how Krishna is so, going to Krishna is never a loss, because Krishna will fulfill all the desires, but in a way that's going to be beneficial to us. Is going to purify our hearts at the same time, But demigods, when we go there, they do not purify our hearts. They may give what we need, but that's going to be a source of entanglement. Whereas when we go to Krishna, he fulfilled the desire of Dhruva, but at the same time purified his heart, where he didn't want anything. You see, so you think of that point, and then you learn a creative way of how to discuss that. It's very simple, really. So you go through all these translations, but then every translation doesn't need a discussion, right? Because there may not be points like that. Then the point about where Prabhupada talks about mere lamentation is useless, how mother and son did something with their life, right? So that also can be discussed. So like this, you go through every one of them, and note down what you need to discuss with them. So you'll develop your confidence, And there's so many things, his meeting with Narad Muni is also very, very instructive, how the relationship between guru and disciple, comes through. His determination comes through, his honesty, in accepting the fact that he had material desires, and he wanted those material desires to be fulfilled, but in an honest way, in a way where, where he wanted to please Krishna. He was crying for Krishna. And that's why Krishna made himself available to him. So many points are coming through, right? So you go through these verses, Mataji, and when you read the purports, even if you were to glance some of them and not able to read all of them, you'll see that how, once you get the start off by immersing yourself in Bhagavatam, you'll see the inspiration to teach will come, you see. You find a little bit of time to immerse yourself, to absorb your heart into that story that you're going to be teaching. And then you'll see that when you're teaching the children, the inspiration will be there. Okay. And your inspiration when you teach them will be doubled, literally doubled. Okay. And that enthusiasm passes on to the children. When they see the teacher enthusiastic, the children become very enthusiastic. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji. Also, the teachers would like to know, Mataji, that like they have to cover only the translation and discussion on translations, or do they have to do the activities also? Like in your book, there are activities behind every chapter.
Well, no, like I said, if you can follow both processes, where you don't have to do every activity, but you can just, what you could do is go through this methodology of discussion and opening their minds, and then you can also do some of the activities, not all of them, things that you can do online. There are some hands-on activities that you cannot do, you see, hands-on activity that you cannot do online, but you can do certain other activities that become very, that can be done through the guidebooks. So you don't have to do all. Yes.
Radha Chandrika Mataji, you want to ask something else also?
Yes, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji, for that elaborate answer. Would we go like theme-wise, like Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, or do we go by canto-wise? How would you suggest? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I would suggest start with Dhruva Maharaj, and Prahlad Maharaj, like these stories. Begin with that. Get the attention of the children, attract their hearts, and then as the children become, more familiar with this philosophy and everything, then go back to Canto 1, Chapter 1. That's what I did. I start out with these stories with children, and then I see their maturity, and then I start, I've done that with a few batches. With one batch, we are on 11th canto, and almost to the end. And we've been doing like for the last 5 years, and we're finishing the Bhagavatam now. So as these children, so as these children are getting older, you can imagine, the inspiration they've been having, and their faith in Bhagavatam is being more and more developed. So this is like if you're starting out with a child that's, 9 years old, I mean, in 4 or 5 years, they would have read the entire Bhagavatam, you see, with you, because you're reading all the translations as well. They're reading that, right, in discussion. And then by the time they go to college, they would have read and understood the Bhagavatam in a way that's going to be, they're going to practically apply it. And then as they get older, in the youth and everything, they're going to read it again, right? Hopefully they're going to read, they will, because they've been attracted. I know a few children who have to leave this class because of something which they just miss it. I know a few children who come back, so because their work in college is getting too complicated, and school or something. But I would not recommend. I would recommend that the parents and teachers encourage the children to keep going and to find the time, not to give up Shastra.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mataji. Thank you very much for your wonderful association.
Mataji, a parent has a question that if you want to daily read out Srimad Bhagavatam to kids, how should the parent schedule her time so as to for the self-study as well as to teach Bhagavatam to her child?
Self-study, yes. So, Mataji, the way my life was with my children was and we were running a preaching center, so we had no time. I had no time to study on my own, with children, with housework, with, work, festivals, and so much preaching activities and deity worship, and so many things were going on. So what I did was I just read with them, and that was my Bhagavatam time. See, that's what I'm saying, that if you really get absorbed in teaching in an inspirational way to your children, that will bring so much inspiration to you as well. And there will be no difference between your own self-study and teaching the children. And this is the only way I read Bhagavatam, when my children were growing up, is reading with them. And we used to study Bhagavatam like 2 hours a day, read do this process. And this is how I covered the entire Bhagavatam. So there's absolutely okay to do that way. And see, what happens is, as you're doing it, the topics, the ability to dive deeper becomes bigger and bigger. So with the result that you're going deeper. It's not like you're at the child's level. You're actually at an adult level, because the children's capacity to understand these adult issues is getting deeper and deeper. It's like Prahlad, it's like Dhruva. They were so learned, right? They were great devotees, but they were still children, they were still children. It's not like we take away their childhood. In fact, we enhance their childhood. But that's how the acharyas were in their childhood were like? They would play with the Krishna dolls, but they were children, but yet they were very Krishna conscious. Right? This is childhood. This is actually real childhood. Childhood does not mean frivolous activities, nonsensical activities. Yes, children need to play though, because the play helps them to develop their imagination. Nothing wrong with that. But if we fill their time with just frivolous things, when we think this is childhood, it's actually not childhood. Real childhood is what we can learn from these great souls, the way they spend their childhood. So we encourage our children to actually study these books, and then to apply these teachings of these books in practical ways. By celebrating a festival, doing a drama. This is application of the philosophy. you know, giving a class or participating in a drama, helping out with a festival, cleaning, cooking, you know, preaching, going out to present Krishna conscious philosophy with an adult, right? So this is all fun time. It's not like we're always sitting with books. Most of the time we are doing practical things, right?
Yes, Mataji, thank you so much. So Mataji, like you were mentioning that the parents should set aside a time, like, you know, for studying themselves, preparing themselves before they start explaining to the children. So it's okay, like you mean to say, just the parent can just sit with the child and same time they
Yeah.
read together and start explaining.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you don't have time to prepare ahead of time, it's okay. And I did that in my days with my children. But now that I have so much, I'm doing more. I mean, I realized that it just, the discussion becomes a little deeper. But at the same time, it can be done because this is how I did it. Without any preparation, I would just sit with them. But because we are older, we have a lot more to share. And the children benefit greatly. They all benefit. You know, my children came out, you know, being understanding Bhagavatam and applying it in their life is still going to be very valuable if you were to do that. And sometimes when the questions come and you're not able to answer, at that point you can read the purport with them. You see, you can read it to them and say, oh, okay, this answer is right here where Prabhupada is saying that yes, it should be, it can be like this. You see, so you can read it right on the spot over there. Some purports, you know, if you feel the need for doing that, you know. Just life's experiences will bring you those realizations.
Right, Mataji. Thank you so much. So Mataji, any particular time slot to be maintained daily, like, you know, half an hour, 1 hour?
Yeah, well, if the teachers are giving this, obviously you have to plan your time accordingly with all the children, you know, when is the best time to do a group class. And for parents, you just pick out the best time in the day that you can spare, you know, whether it's evening, morning, you have to see that what is the best time. It doesn't really matter if it's not, if it's during the day or night, evening time, you know, as long as that it's the time where every child is relaxed and you're relaxed and you can expand their minds, you see? You know, so you can see, I mean, obviously the first thing in the morning is very nice because the mind is very tuned in for understanding spiritual things, you know? So that's a great time to do that. But if you cannot, then don't get discouraged. Like, see, the classes that I have, I can only spare evening. So I do it in the evening. So, and the children are just as alert. I mean, I don't see them slacking off, you know. So do what you can, the best way. But what I would do is be determined to do it, though. Not that you skip it altogether because it's too troublesome or too difficult.
Right, Mataji. Any ideal duration also suggested by you?
Yes. The time I would say I've seen that between 45 minutes to an hour is great, you know. And like if you're doing a chapter or something, then, well, a chapter like this one, like 8 chapters, very, very long. So this I would divide it into two turns, or maybe it could be 3 sometimes, you know. Yeah, it's quite, I think it's 80 verses or something. So it's quite a few. So, but most chapters one is able to do within an hour in 1 hour. So, and you know, many chapters you just have to read fast. I mean, you just go through without discussion, little discussion. Sometimes chapters where there's prayers being offered by the demigods to Krishna or by some other devotee. So we just have them read, but we pick out the essential things in order to discuss. For example, in the Vritasura story, in the Narayan Kavach chapter, you know, where Vishwarupa is giving them the Narayan Kavach for protection against the demons. In that chapter, the demigods are offering the prayers, and it's one after another, these prayers where they're invoking the Lord in his different features, in his different incarnations. And so we just read through that, but there are certain amazing points in those prayers. So we just bring that out, you know, where the demigods are praying for the Lord to, you know, they're praying to actually the club of the Lord, you know, and they're praying to that the Lord use that club to pound the demons to pieces, to pulverize them. So it was very interesting where we took that point and we started discussing about, see, demigods want the demons finished, but a pure devotee doesn't even pray for that. He doesn't want the Lord to smash the demons. So this is the difference between the mentality and the mental makeup of a mixed devotee versus a pure devotee like Prahlad, right? Prahlad is praying, so you can make comparisons. It becomes so effective. Every story, you can bring in other stories and you can ask them, instead of telling them, you can ask them, do you remember any other story in which this happened? And they'll come with that type of example. They'll come and they get so excited. And there's 10 different examples, and you'll find all these 10 children giving each one, and you give them one turn for one example each only. So everybody gets a turn. And then, they give that example. Oh, yes, in this story, it's very, this similar thing happened, right? So like that. And then you can make comparisons. Okay, Prahlad would not pray like this, but the or devotees will, demigods pray like that, So we see the mentality, but yet they're devotees, and we also can relate with them because we also have desires, material desires, right? So in another way, we also develop the element of compassion, and how every devotee at every stage is eligible to go to Krishna for help, and develop that compassionate mood. Like through the Dhruva story, you see the compassionate mood that is being developed in the story, where Dhruva has material desires, and he actually wants to finish off his stepmother and get rid of her and all those things. He's coming with so much revenge in his heart, but then and we have compassion for him because he's been hurt, right? He's been terribly hurt. We don't see him as a demon or anything. Even Suruchi, ultimately we see her with compassion, she did suffer the reaction. So you're developing that mood of compassion also simultaneously in the children. But this element of comparison from one story to another, and seeing the different points, just discussing them, brings the children that element of compassion, helps develop that compassion and a deeper understanding of more critical thinking is developed through these stories. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for the detailed answer. It was beautifully explained. Mataji, there's one. Shall we conclude with one last question from the chat box?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
The question is, what is the ideal age to start proper study of Bhagavatam from Canto 1 for kids?
Okay. Well, I would say that, like I said, there's a group in London which is called Baby Bhagavatam Group, and they've got children as young as 3 to 5 or maybe 6, and they're doing it. So it depends how you want to do it. You'll have to use more creativity in teaching children who are very young, but definitely it becomes easier when they're able to read. And so I would say more like 7 or, more like 7 if you're doing an online class for them collectively. I would not take very small children because on an online, it's very difficult to keep them together and to get them disciplined. You can try that, and see if it works. But generally, starting the age of 7 is very effective, or even 8. Even 7 is okay. Yeah, as long as they can read with the parents' help. Now, if the children cannot read well and you have to help them every few words, it's not a good idea. Then you should take a child who's a little bit more, better at reading, then start at that age. But if the parent but if the child is just getting stuck with a few words here and there, then the parent can sit next to the child and prevent and help the child to pronounce those words. Because if the teacher is doing that, then it becomes like an English class. So we have to try to avoid that situation. And sometimes the children will read wrong and will carry on. It's okay, it's okay. We are trying to get the essence, and we're not trying to make a language class out of this. We cannot forget the purpose behind the whole thing, So for small children, if they are having difficulty, either they wait, a few months, or if they're getting stuck with very few words, and the parent can help.
All right, Mataji. Thank you so much, Mataji, for the wonderful, wonderful session. It was a detailed and very practical one. we would like to wholeheartedly thank you for the demo class, and we request you to kindly guide us in future too.
Thank you very much for allowing me to share here, and looking forward to many, many groups of children studying Bhagavatam. So hope to hear from all of you and the good news. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Thank you for your blessings. We thank all the participants for having joined us today. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna. Danvat.